Hello everybody, this is Fairygeist, and today I'm going to show you a project that I had done a little while back. It's a PVC virtual reality controller mod for games such as Hot Dogs, Horseshoes, Hand Grenades, and some of the other first-person shooters. When you have multiple grip points on an item or a weapon in-game, it can be very awkward when you just have those floating controllers. There are a number of companies that manufacture these gun mods for sale. At the time when I made this, they were not available in the US, and I really didn't feel like spending the money to have one shipped. So I decided to make my own using PVC. So on the other side of the screen you can see all the different parts. They have already been cut to length. I started out with a 6-foot piece, then cut them according to my measurements. Now you'll see with the individual pieces that they are cut. They have been drilled, and I used a heat gun to bend them into the shape that I wanted. Now, for the purposes of assembly and disassembly, I have marked the edges of them with some small dots using a pilot drill. Makes it a little easier to put together if you disassemble it. Now, I personally used small screws, little almost drywall type screws. In my assembly, you can also use PVC, epoxy, or glue. Or you could just leave it so it could be easily pulled apart and put back together. Now, because I used the heat gun to bend them into shape, I felt it was a better option to use the screws in order to line them up. Now, the way that I have done this is for the Oculus touch controllers. They have a unique angle to the grip, which makes it a little different from some of the other ones. I do have a Samsung Odyssey Plus that I also intend to make some grip holders for, or controller holders for. Inside the individual holders, they have been shaped using a heat gun, and I placed a little bit of carpet friction tape, usually used to keep carpets from sliding on hardwood floors. It's essentially just a thin layer of foam that holds the controller in place. Now, my personal setup, because I'm left-handed, is set up with the left-hand control, right-hand control setup. It is angled properly. It did take quite a bit of work once you construct the initial layout. You'll have to adjust the angles for that. So again, I have marked each individual piece so that I know where they go. Now this particular part here is essentially the stock of the controller mod itself. This is a part that goes up against your shoulder. Again, used 1-inch PVC. Used a heat gun to bend it in the correct shape so that it kind of fits in there. Each person is different, so a lot of it is going to be fine-tuning. A hairdryer will work as well, but it's going to take a lot longer. Now, to attach the shoulder stock to the rest of the item, to the rest of the piece, I used a 90-degree angle. Again, each piece has been marked with corresponding dots so that they fit. Now essentially you just slide it in, line up, And when reassembling, the most difficult part is lining up the holes for the screws. Takes a little bit of effort. They are snug, especially after applying the heat gun. You do want to be careful with the heat. It will burn, it will melt. Now, as I said, I did use screws to hold these in place. So in the assembly, I just can put the screws back in, and for anyone who's right-handed, I can swap the position of the left and right grip holders, controller holders rather. Now, once that's in, it'll stay in place. And this essentially will go up against your shoulder. Now, as a bare piece of PVC, it's not the most comfortable thing to be pressing up against your shoulder. So what I've done is I've taken some pipe foam and placed it on, and then used your standard plastic zip ties to hold it together. And once it's been placed on, it'll just slide right over top. Now you will see that the end extends past slightly in order to give it a little more comfort if you accidentally lean your cheek onto it. This will stay in place a lot better than just the PVC. It's a lot more friction with the foam, and it's a lot more comfortable to hold for extended periods. Now the next piece down, again, lined up based on the dots. So you can see dot, I put 2 dots there, 2 dots there. Now initially I tried doing this with just a straight PVC, and what I found was I could never get the angle of the sights lined up properly using just a straight piece of PVC. And the front and rear controllers never lined up properly. So that led me to using the heat gun to adjust the placement. Lined up. Now again, if you're just going to keep it in one piece, you can use like the PVC epoxy or glue, and that'll hold it in place as well. Now with this particular setup, add it on upside down. With this particular connection, rather than using a screw on both sides, I used the small screw on one side, and then the other side I took one of those little metal ring screws, and I'll show you why in a second. Now, I do recommend, if you're going to use screws, use a pilot drill to put a hole in first. It'll make it much easier to put the screw in, remove the screw if for any reason you are looking to do that. It just makes things a lot easier. Now again, with this piece, I used a piece of pipe foam in the off chance that I want to grab it from a different angle. for whatever reason, or if I want it resting on either my arm or on an object. In the case of simulating shooting from a barricade, this will protect both the PVC and whatever you're leaning it on. Now the next part is going to be where the first of the grip controllers, or the controller grips attach. I just used a T-section. Gives it a flat bottom and a nice little lift at the top. Again, you want to try and keep the holes lined up as much as possible. Now these are where you definitely want to make sure that you have the grip, that you have the controller angles correct for your personal build, and how the controllers align. If you just glue it on or screw it in, you may find it a little difficult. You may find that it makes it very difficult to aim. And once it's screwed in, it's very difficult to make any adjustments to it. Excuse me. So again, I do have this piece marked as well. Now, in the event that I would change it for a right-handed player, essentially all I do is take this piece and replace it with the other one, so that the right-handed grip ends up towards the rear, and the left-handed one would end up in the front. Now this piece required the biggest bend, and was actually one of the more difficult pieces to get to the right angle. This is a piece that will line up the front, or the fore end of a rifle in the game, to the stock, the rear end of the rifle. And if you don't have those aligned, initially when I was using it, on the first attempt, I found that my right hand was placed much higher than my left hand, which put the sights, the front sight, very high. So this piece required a significantly increased bend in comparison to the rear piece of it. Again, anytime you're heating the PVC, like any plastic, if it overheats or burns, it does release toxic chemicals into the air, and you don't want to breathe those in. So you do want to be very careful if you're using a heat gun, to make sure you're in a well ventilated area and try to keep the heat as low as possible in order to get what you need done. Adjusted. Not very easy to line this up perfectly. Nice thing about PVC is it is extremely durable. So you can always smack it on the ground if things don't want to line up properly. Now, I put a screw in both sides in order to hold it in place. Again, that's up to the individual making this. I really didn't want any movement when using it or when storing it. If something bumped into it, I didn't want the pieces coming out of alignment. The actual assembly and cutting and everything took about a third of the time that it took to get everything lined up. It was a lot of trial and error, a lot of sitting there, setting it up, adjusting the angle, going back into the game, seeing if the sights lined up, seeing if everything lined up properly. So it was kind of a tedious process, but it does make things much easier when you're playing a game such as Hot Dogs, Horseshoes, and Hand Grenades. Any of the shooter simulations that utilize a multiple hand grip. Now, again, another T section to go up front, and another piece of foam. Now on this particular piece, having the foam also helps if you don't feel like using both controllers, if you just want more of a standard grip, so gripping like this instead of like so. Having that pipe foam on there does give a really good grip as well as a good indexing point. All right. So the other helpful thing about placing little dots in there is it does give you a nice starting point to line up so that you're not sitting twisting and bending more than necessary to line up the screw with the hole. At least that was the intention. Should be live. Little piece of excess PVC. Get a little bit of PVC. Now, once the screws are in, using coarse threaded screws, such as like a drywall screw, works better than, say, a machine screw, because it essentially provides threading inside the PVC, so you don't have to sit there and worry about everything, having to redo the holes. realign the screws or everything wearing out and the screws not staying in. Now, if you do prefer, you can use machine screws or any other type of self-threading screw. Giving it a whack on the floor to set it in place. As I said, I personally prefer the coarser threaded screws rather than having to re-drill, re-thread, or as you can use PVC glue or epoxy to hold everything together. I like the option of being able to disassemble it so that it can be packed in a smaller container. So that it takes up less room. But the choice is up to you. So far you have the buttstock, the rear grip housing, the front grip housing, nice centerpiece. Now I do recommend trying to measure a bit between your shoulder and the rear grip, the rear controller holder. That would be your length of pull. Generally, it's going to be anywhere from about 9 to 13 inches. Honestly, whatever feels more comfortable will work. Next step is assembling the controller holders. Now, as you can see, I didn't clean these up much. Just place them. Essentially, they're just going between the T-joints and these little 45-degree angle joints, which is what I ended up using to make the controller grips. So essentially, the maximum length of those is completely up to you. Minimum length, it just needs to hold both pieces together. If you do want measurements, leave me a comment. I will disassemble everything, measure everything, send it out to you. But again, a lot of it is going to be based on the individual. What works for me may not work for you. Same with the angle. Now, I'm depending on your system, depending on your controllers, whether you're using a Vive or a Windows mixed reality headset, the angles may have to be different as the sensors are in different locations. Both the Vive and Windows mixed reality place the sensor ring towards the top. Same with the new Oculus Touch S and the Oculus Touch for the Oculus Rift S and the Oculus Quest. With the original CB1 Touch, they were placed below the top of the controller. and at a more direct angle. So again, a lot of this is going to be experimentation, making adjustments on the fly, and trial and error. The trying to remember the name of the company. There was one that was for sale. There was a gun mod for sale that was sent out of France, I believe, and that was the closest I could find that was set up for the Oculus Rift at the time, and they were charging somewhere around $50 for the controller mod, and almost another $50 for shipping and handling. And at the time, it seemed like such a ridiculous amount to pay. Now they have changed sources and are shipping from within the U.S. I did at a later time purchase one. I can show that to you in another video, give you a review on it. I've been trying to remember where I purchased it from, because I would like to get the adapters for the Samsung Odyssey controllers. Now, with the Oculus Touch, the grip holders have to be shaped a certain way. This was probably the most stressful part of the build, simply because in order to shape them properly, I had to use the heat gun on the PVC with the controller in place. I ended up wrapping the controller in cellophane, saran wrap, in order to, one, disperse the heat a bit, and two, to prevent, in the off chance that the PVC melted, anything getting onto the controllers. It was a lot of repeated heating, forming, shaping, squeezing it to fit, and letting it cool off, and then repeating the process all over again just to get it to fit. Now with the HTC Vive and if I understand correctly, a couple of the mixed reality the mixed reality controllers. The HTC Vive, the original controllers, are ambidextrous. They can be used in either hand. So the grip modules can have the same shape, and it doesn't matter what their position is, except possibly a bit on the angle relative to from the front to the rear. In terms of the Windows mixed reality headsets, the controllers for the Samsung Odyssey, the Oculus Rift, the Oculus Touch controllers, there is a difference in the angle and the placement of the sensors, so they are specific to left and right hand. Hence why I have individually marked them so I know which goes to which. Now, some of the gun stock mods that I've seen, some of the gun stocks for VR that I've seen, that are all one piece, are pretty much specifically designed for right-handers. So for the 10% of us who are left-handed, we kind of get left out. That was another reason that I decided to make my own, just to see if it was possible. Trying to do it as cheaply as possible. I think I spent maybe $12 total for all the materials. Some of the stuff I purchased I didn't end up needing. And once this last controller grip is on, that's pretty much the extent of what's needed. Anything further is up to you. This is, this is all that really is needed. Gives you a grip in the rear, grip in the front. As I said, I did use that carpet friction tape just to give it a little bit of friction against the controller, kind of hold it in place as much as possible. The controllers sit in fairly nicely, doesn't fall out, but it's easy enough for precise adjustments directly from the controller. So once it's in, they pop in and out very easily, but still hold well enough to be used in game. Now, personally, I added a couple of additional pieces of PVC 1 just to make it a little more balanced. I mean, it's very lightweight, probably about maybe 2 pounds, but just to give it a little extra balance, I added a couple more pieces to the front, one for length, and this piece, which is a 1 inch to 1.5 inch adapter. This one will basically, you put 1 inch PVC on one side and 2 inch PVC on the other side, or 1.5 inch PVC on the other side. Gives it a little bit of an extra flare. So, in my opinion, it's a little aesthetically more pleasing. It does have the added benefit of protecting the controllers in the off chance that I bump into a wall, or if I drop the front end, hit something, it's not going to hit the controller, it's going to hit that PVC. Also, does give you another grip. If you're looking for, if you prefer a long reach grip, it'll give you more of the, it gives you the ability to do the C-clamp type grip. if you're for people who shoot modern sporting rifles, a lot of shooters that I know prefer that C-clamp style grip. I'm not sold on it completely myself, but it does give you the option. I do like it for some of the long range weapons. It gives you a little bit more room to make minor adjustments on target. I did put a little piece of pipe foam inside the end of this, mainly to keep it from sounding like a hollow tube when it bumps into anything. And now, as I said, I did use that little ring hook in the back on the one side. It's going to be, for me, it's on the inside, the right side of the rear stock position. And I have a binder ring, book binder ring that I place through, and it works as a sling attachment point. So, all in all, a little hard to fit in frame, but PVC virtual reality controller mod for shooting games. Again, if you have any questions, any suggestions, any ideas on how you'd modify it, let me know in the comments. If you have, again, if you want the instructions, let me know. I will, measurements, let me know. I'll print them up. Or I'll look them up, measure them, and put them up. And if you want to see more of this type of video, let me know. If you liked it, like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and I will see you in the next video.